Hello ratbags, it's Jade. Welcome to my outward first impressions. I've done a few videos of this Let's Plays over the weekend. I've done live stream and my hype video showing you everything there was to know about Outward before it released got quite a few views. But I have to make sure I give you my impressions properly, what I think about the game. I've probably sunk around, I don't know, 5 or 6 hours into it now, and I have to say I probably won't be playing it much more. Outward is an RPG open world survival game where you can go off and forge your own adventure, going in different directions, completing quests and basically leveling up your character or trying new ways to play. It revolves around a skill system where you can choose different attacks by unlocking them or learning them, and then that's the way that the combat flows, with a heavy reliance on magic as you get into the game. The world of Orion is pretty big. There are lots of locations that you maybe want to go and explore. Trouble is, once you start getting to these locations, you realise how empty the game is. Not to mention how old the game is. And I'm not talking just about the graphics, but the gameplay, the combat systems. This game, if it come out maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I think I'd be raving about how an independent team, a small team of only 10, how could they make something so good? But this is 2019, and forget the games like God of War and Red Dead Redemption. There are plenty of other smaller games out there that look fantastic, that have really great combat systems in them. It doesn't necessarily mean just because you're a small studio or developer that you'll get given a pass for making a half-empty game. And that's what Outward is. It's a half-empty game. If it had been fleshed out more, I think it really would have been massively successful. But for me, it's going to achieve nothing more than cult status. So let's break it down a little bit more individually. The looks of the game, as I said, it does look old. It looks like an Xbox 360 game. We are in 2019. It doesn't have to be the looks of a AAA blockbuster. There are plenty of other smaller independent games though that have made their games look fantastic, and Outward just isn't one of them. It feels empty. There are certainly some points of interest that are interesting, but they are few and far between. I feel like I'm just running around from one point to another and there's no real chance to go off and go, oh, what's that? That looks really super interesting. You have this huge mountain that just dominates the landscape in the early stages and it kind of draws you to it a lot of the time. But other than that, there's just no chance for sort of coming across something unexpected. It really feels like it's the usual stuff you come to expect in a fantasy land. Also, the lack of foliage, the lack of environmental features really doesn't make me feel like I'm exploring a real breathing world. There's a few trees littered around and it's got the grass running about, but I think there could have been done a lot more to make the game feel like alive. The resources are spotted about here and there and it just feels like they have just been placed down anywhere rather than real thinking about where they are in the landscapes. It's a shame. There are different biomes to explore, and as you get into the game, seasons can affect stuff as well, and so you can go and explore the same area and it'll be covered in snow. That was a great idea and that was one of the best parts of the environment and the look of the game, but the rest of it just lets it down. It just really feels a bit basic. I've previously said it doesn't matter if the gameplay and the game systems are tight. What does it matter if the game looks a little bit old? But it does start affecting your enjoyment overward. If you're not in awe or if you're not looking at something and wondering how amazing they managed to make that, you're kind of left with just the game systems. And when the game systems aren't great, you're kind of left with just a bit of a disappointment. The story is probably one of the biggest disappointments. You literally start off and it's a page or a piece of artwork detailing exactly what just happened to you. You went on a ship to journey to make your fortune, the ship sinks and you're back at square one at your village and now you've got to pay your blood debt. That is the story, that is the start. No cutscenes, no real leading up to something, just one flat panel with a little bit of artwork. You then wake up to some horrendous voice work and I really don't like the way the game has implemented the voice acting into it. Actors say one part of the line, the script, and then they're silent, so you have to carry on reading it. This put me off so many times. I was waiting for the NPCs to carry on and they just stopped dead. It ended up breaking the immersion for me, so anytime I was talking to an NPC, in my head I just wanted to maybe read it on my own without any voice, but it just kept interrupting and the sound levels for these characters were all over the place. Some were really high, some were really low. It just felt really amateurish. One thing Outward does get right is the choose your own adventure style. So when you're exploring, if something happens and you get raided by some bandits, you may not be killed, you may wake up in a prison, or you may wake up in another location, you've been rescued. But you don't see any of this. It only just teleports you somewhere, and you have a little splash card like this and it says you've just woken up or you've just been rescued. This is just really poor. I'm guessing developers just didn't have enough time to flesh this out more, put some more actions in it, or maybe they didn't want to. Maybe they want this idea that if you make a mistake, it isn't just a reload scenario, which you can't do. You can't reload your game. You have to just accept whatever fate befalls you. And I like that idea. I like that aspect of it. I really like the idea of consequences. If you fail at something, you're going to have to start off somewhere else. Or if you win at something, you may get different consequences. But they don't push this far enough. It's only when you fail at things, when you complete certain missions and quests, you don't necessarily get a choice in what happens next, or certain scenarios will happen based on how you completed that mission. If they'd have pushed that, I could have said it was something really original, and just Outward isn't original. It borrows systems from games like The Witcher, from the Dark Souls series, as well as other survival games, and it just doesn't really manage to strike out on any of them on its own. It's an adequate game, and I think for people that like role-playing games, that like fantasy games, they may enjoy this game a lot. And if you like Dark Souls, you may like it, but not because it's a hard game, although it is, but more just so like the RPG elements and the inventory management and the items. There's plenty of that stuff in it, and there's plenty of skills and magic trees to be learning. You can use a variety of different ways to attack enemies, and as you progress during the game, you're going to focus more and more on magic. These are all good tropes, but the combat just lets it down. It's so clunky. It's so just not what I would consider a 2019 game. Enemies are more or less sponges. Their attacks are really repetitive, and you can pretty much get a grip on most enemies just by having one attempt at them, or maybe just watching what they do for a few seconds while they're trying to attack you. It gets really repetitive really quickly. There are different enemies in the game. There's NPC humans, there's all sorts of creatures, dinosaurs, but they all just start becoming more or less the same entity. I don't really feel like I'm in a vibrant world and there's so many different dangers. That may be down to the frequency of the creatures. You can walk around, and if you're careful, you can pretty much avoid most enemies in the game just by walking around them. There are so few on the map. Maybe it's a deliberate choice because it's so deliberate in everything else. The survival elements, the combat, the way you move. Maybe they wanted to make sure that the world wasn't filled with creatures. But one of the best features from a game like Ark is that feeling that you could be attacked at any moment. And in survival games, I think that's a really important feature. It just doesn't have that in Outward. You kind of have to go and look and choose your combat options or choose your battles. And that might not necessarily be a bad thing if the battles were interesting, but they're not. They're just pretty stock standard, and the actual animations for attacking are just not very good either. I don't want to be too super negative. I can appreciate some really good stuff here, like I said, the adventure mode, and I do like certain aspects of the skills and the magic. It's a bit old school and I like it for that reason, but it just doesn't do enough to be a new game. It doesn't do enough to have its own unique take on things. The length of the game is around 20 hours doing one playthrough. Developers have said you can do 3 or 4 playthroughs, and it'll probably take about 80 hours learning all the skills and trying new ways to play. But the world is so uninteresting that you really don't want to carry on exploring once you've been around it once or twice. Not every game can be a Skyrim with thousands of radiant quests in it, but I still would like more options. I still want more creatures. I still want more NPCs to give me more choices about what I'm going to do and what I'm going to achieve. Lots of the missions and the structures just seem pretty basic and mundane, just like the start of the story. You are not Dovahkiin. You are not the Master of Dragons. You are literally someone that's just paying off a debt incurred by your family hundreds of years ago or whatever it was. That's not really a story for me, and I just don't like the way that it was implemented. It just really is a shame. I had high hopes for Outward. I thought it was going to be something filled with vibrancy, with lots of different points of interest, lots of creatures, and it just doesn't have that. When you look at the price of it, that could all be made a lot easier, and it could be more forgiving if the game wasn't selling for the price it is. It's not a AAA price, it's not selling for $60, it's around $35–40 at the moment. That is still a hell of a lot of money to play a game which in my opinion is very bargain basement. It's very much a case of being something I shouldn't have maybe sold for more than $20. I would have got my game's value out of this with $20. I would have felt that maybe if I did complete the one playthrough for 20 hours, I would have got something out of it. It doesn't always necessarily tally. I've played short games for only 2 hours and I spent 20 quid on it, and the experience left me feeling great. But Outward doesn't do that because it just doesn't offer enough new experiences. It just literally brings together some elements from other games and doesn't necessarily make one of them elements its own. So yes, if you like fantasy, if you like role-playing games and you have some spare cash and there really is nothing else going on, go ahead and pick up Outward. But for the same price, you could literally go and pick up The Witcher at the moment. You could pick up The Elder Scrolls. There are so many big, huge games that are quite old, but you would get so much more value out of them. You'll get so much more enjoyment out of the game systems, the story, and just everything about the gameplay. This is a very much wait for it to go on sale game, even if you do love them. That's my opinion. The game systems become way too repetitive, the world becomes uninteresting very quickly, and the story and the voice acting in it is just not really up to scratch. I won't be covering it anymore on the channel. I'm not going to carry on playing my Let's Play of it, unfortunately, because I just don't have anything drawing me in to conclude it. There is no real story that I'm interested in so far. Let me know though if you do. Let me know what you feel about the story once you've sunk it all through and you've completed one playthrough. I think in the future they could really expand on what happens next. If they can really make the experience in their next game about features that happen, you know, if you die or you get captured, how that changes the story going forward. That would be a game I would love to play, and that would be something pretty unique. But Outward is just pretty much a bog standard bargain basement game. I am Jade PG. I always give you my honest opinion about games. Let me know if you've been picking it up. Let me know if you disagree with me. Pop it in the comment section, and I'll see you rat bags for another full impressions of a game very soon.